Tonight, ban on oil as Russia's war on Ukraine rages. The U.S. is banning Russian oil and gas. Gas prices climbing ever higher, even as the surge in fuel prices in America surpass an all-time record high. And Exodus.
The last 3 days have been the most horrible days of my life.
The sea of humanity fleeing war-torn Ukraine, joining more than 2 million refugees in their escape. Plus,
they need everything.
Israel working with Christian organizations to help Ukrainian Jews get out of the country. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The U.S. hitting Russia where it hurts. Welcome to Faith Nation. In Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. The president announcing today the U.S. will ban all Russian oil imports. The goal forcing Moscow to pull back from its war on Ukraine. The president also acknowledging this move will come at a cost for Americans, already facing historic prices at the gas pump. The CBN News senior national affairs correspondent Heather Sells has our top story. Heather?
Yeah, Jenna, the president today warned that Americans will face rising prices, but he told the public defending freedom is going to cost. The president is hoping that Americans will view the ban as necessary to stop Russian President Putin's war on Ukraine.
That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine.
A new poll shows more than 70% of Americans support the Russian oil ban, including 2/3 of Republicans.
Gas prices have absolutely exploded in the last week.
But will that public support continue? Pain at the pump is already real, with prices topping $4 a gallon, the highest since 2008. The Russian oil ban will accelerate that trend, potentially sending gas prices over $5 a gallon and worsening inflation.
Diesel prices now $4.65 a gallon. That's going to affect everything, from food to lumber. It is the fuel of commerce in the country.
It's not clear how much pain the U.S. ban will inflict on Russia. The U.S. is not a top buyer. It imports only about 5% of Russia's crude oil exports. Today, Britain announced its own oil ban, but the rest of Europe, which is heavily reliant on Russian oil and gas, has not. Still, Biden is touting the economic sanctions released against Russia in the last week, saying they've caused its economy to crater.
1 ruble is now worth less than 1 American penny.
Back at home, Republicans are calling on Biden to increase domestic oil production.
Actually, we do it most environmentally safely than anywhere in the world. And we create American jobs and make our economy stronger. So why don't we do it here? Until I hear that, until I see actions that support that, I'll have a bit of skepticism about their commitment to lowering gas prices.
And the president today pushed back on that argument, saying his administration is not holding back on U.S. production. And he also put in a plug for clean energy, saying that it is the best road to energy independence. Jenna.
All right, Heather, thank you very much. And here with us now is Victoria Coates, Distinguished Fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council, and she was also a Deputy National Security Advisor under President Trump. Victoria, good evening, welcome, and thank you for joining us. So the Biden administration says green. The Biden administration really says green is the future. The reality is, though, is that the country's not there yet. America still runs on oil.
No, it absolutely does. And even more than oil, we run on natural gas, which has been an enormous boon to the country, is a very clean energy. We extract it, as part of the intro said, very safely, very cleanly, and we can exploit it cleanly. So the notion that we should suddenly take this aspirational leap to unreliable renewables like wind and hydro is illogical. We have the resources we need. All Americans should be well supplied and at a reasonable price.
Today, the UK also announced it will ban Russian oil. Victoria, how much do you think this move on the part of the U.S. and the UK will really hurt Russia?
In many ways, it's symbolic because neither we nor the UK nor Canada, which has announced a similar move, are large importers of Russian fuel. But it does send a very important message. And the other message I'd very much like to hear out of the White House is that they are fully supportive of American domestic production. That would have the most calming effect on markets and prices, that the policies of the last year are going to be reversed, and that the Biden White House will actually make good on its word that it's not holding back U.S. domestic production.
While I have you here, I want to ask you about another major development we saw today. Poland now says it will lend its fighter jets to Ukraine as part of a deal with the United States. What does this mean for the war?
It's a very interesting development. And I think what you're seeing, Jenna, is a number of countries that suffered grievously both during World War II and during the Cold War know what's afoot here. They know they've taken the measure of Vladimir Putin and what he's willing to do in Ukraine. And what's been interesting to me is everyone's been running around saying, oh, we can't do anything provocative. We have to take options off the table so not to escalate with Putin. And the only person who seems to have full range of motion is Putin. So I think, given the disastrous impact of his invasion on Ukraine over the last 2 weeks and his utter lack of response to the measures that have been taken so far, although they may bite more strongly in the future, I think it is time for a country like Poland, which is also in his crosshairs, he said so, to start to make some moves.
Mm-hmm. Victoria, just about 30 seconds left here, but what more would you like to see the U.S. do?
I would like to see them not be surprised by a move like this out of Poland. Undersecretary Norland testified a few minutes ago that they were shocked. They didn't know this was happening, so they don't have a response. So I would like to see better coordinated work with our NATO allies to make sure we have all options in place. I'd like to see us respond as much as we can respond as quickly as we can to Ukrainian requests for things that we've decided to supply them with, make sure those supply lines are very fluid, and then continue the outpouring of support for the Ukrainian people.
Right. All right, Victoria Coates with the American Foreign Policy Council. It's always good to have your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna.
Well, a sea of humanity is slowly moving through Ukraine in a desperate attempt to flee the war. North of Kyiv, as many as 100,000 people may be trapped without water or electricity as Russian forces bombard the city. More than 2 million people have already escaped, most of them women and children. George Thomas takes us to the border of Poland and Ukraine, where the greatest refugee crisis since World War II is unfolding.
Our destination this morning, the town of Rawaruska, just west of Lviv. The drive normally takes about 30 minutes, but nothing around here is normal. It's taking 4 to 5 hours now to reach this border town that straddles Ukraine and Poland because of this. Hundreds of cars, bumper to bumper, filled with women, children, and the elderly fleeing the conflict here. Because we are press, we get through the line fairly quickly, thanks to a Ukrainian military escort. A quarter of a mile from the border, we meet Irina Hadash, standing with so many others in the bitter cold, waiting to cross.
The last 3 days have been the most horrible days of my life.
Irina is here with her 2 children after escaping bombings just south of Kyiv. 10-year-old Mila is worried about her best friends back home.
They're not answering my text messages. The last few days, I have had many terrible emotions. I'm just praying they are okay, but right now I'm controlling my emotions.
Standing a few feet away, Anna Mikitenko and her 3 children. They were in an underground bunker in Kyiv for a week when she started to notice worrying signs.
They kept asking me, Mama, when will this all end? Mama, how long will this go on for? Mama, why is this happening?
Anna's daughter, Nastya, also 10, really misses her father.
Men who are between 18 and 16 years old cannot leave the country. They have to fight.
Alexander Stepaniuk, standing at the last Ukrainian border checkpoint, was overcome by emotion as he watched his wife, 2-year-old and 9-year-old walk across Poland.
Це просто жахливо.
This is terrible that in the 21st century something like this is happening. How can one man cause so much grief in a big European country? We did nothing to deserve this.
The UN says more than 1 million people so far have escaped from the central and eastern parts of Ukraine. Over 800,000 of them have walked right here through these gates. This is the Ukrainian border, and on the other side is Poland. And the future for them remains uncertain. Those unable to walk to the Polish border boarded buses, while tearful husbands watched and blew last kisses to loved ones.
I really don't want to leave my house, my city, and my country. I hope that everything will end and we will return home soon.
With her children by her side, Iriana Hadash and a dozen others took their last few steps on Ukrainian soil and walked into an unknown future.
I have feelings of despair and fear, but I know I have to fight it to stay strong for my children.
George Thomas, CBN News on the Ukraine-Poland border.
And CBN's Operation Blessing is on the ground in Poland, providing critical relief to refugees. To partner with Operation Blessing, you can text OB Crisis to 71777. Coming up, why the conflict in Ukraine is dominating U.S. officials' concerns over imminent threats to the U.S. The U.S. is set to face increasingly complex security challenges this year, according to the annual assessment by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. But while adversaries like China, North Korea, and Iran are expected to pose direct threats to the U.S., the war in Ukraine is outweighing those national security concerns. CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us with more. Caitlin?
Each year, the nation's top intelligence chiefs testify before Congress about major anticipated threats. Usually, the list tends to be more theoretical. This year, however, one has become reality.
Russia, of course, also remains a critical priority and is a significant focus right now in light of President Putin's recent and tragic invasion of Ukraine, which has produced a shock to the geopolitical order with implications for the future that we are only beginning to understand.
The intelligence community predicts up to 4,000 Russian soldiers have been killed over the last 2 weeks, a cost of Moscow underestimating Ukraine's resistance.
I think Putin is angry and frustrated right now. He's likely to double down and try to grind down the Ukrainian military with no regard for civilian casualties.
Putin also misjudged the response from the West and NATO.
While Putin probably anticipated many of the current sanctions to be imposed when he weighed the cost of the invasion, we judged that he did not anticipate either the degree to which the United States and its allies and partners would take steps to undermine his capacity to mitigate Western actions, or the pullback from Russia initiated by non-state actors in the private sector.
National Intelligence Director Avril Haines called Putin's announcement of a heightened nuclear alert extremely unusual, while adding she believes it's more of an attempt to deter Western involvement than a signal he intends to go nuclear. Still, Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Scott Barrier, cautioned against underestimating the Russian president.
He says something, we should listen very, very carefully and maybe take him at his word.
The intelligence chiefs also touched on the potential of a cyber war stemming from the conflict in Eastern Europe.
We're very, very focused on ransomware actors that might conduct attacks against our allies or our nation. Very, very focused on some type of cyber activity that's designed for perhaps Ukraine that spreads more broadly into other countries. Third is any type of attack that an adversary would conduct against an ally. And then finally, certainly our critical infrastructure.
FBI Director Christopher Wray calling on the private sector to immediately reach out if they suspect any cyber attack.
Our field offices are in a position where they can have a technically trained agent at the doorstep of any company that's victimized within about an hour anywhere in the country. And time is of the essence.
The growing relationship between Russia and China also came up. CIA Director William Burns saying he believes China is unsettled by what's happening in Ukraine, pointing to the difficulties Russia has run into, the global economic fallout, and even the potential for damage to Beijing's reputation after aligning with Moscow. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you. With that, let's bring in Eli Kohanim, former U.S. envoy. Eli, welcome. Good to have you tonight. So we just heard Caitlin's report on worldwide threats to national security. As the war in Ukraine rages on, what threats to the homeland worry you most?
Jenna, I have to say that we need to be taking very seriously Putin putting his nuclear forces on alert. We cannot underestimate the moment that we're in right now. This conflict and this war is not yet over, and there's so much opportunity for misunderstandings and miscommunications. So we're in a very delicate moment in history, and truly, I also think there's a lesson to be learned here for the United States as we are about to sign a deal with the Iranians that is going to give them the very same power that we're seeing Putin have over us and holding us hostage as a nuclear weapons capable country.
In banning Russian oil imports, you mentioned Iran. The U.S. is now also turning to Venezuela, run by the corrupt dictator Nicolas Maduro. Ellie, how troubling is this? I mean, we've even seen some Democrats criticizing the Biden administration over this.
Jenna, this is so deeply troubling. It almost is beyond any reasoning or understanding how the Biden administration could suddenly be visiting Venezuela. And, you know, the Trump administration levied sanctions against Maduro and the Maduro regime. And our belief was that Maduro is illegitimate. He has practically destroyed the Venezuelan country. He has starved the people of the country. And so the fact that the Biden administration is now visiting there, it reminds me very much of President Obama's visit to Cuba, this effort to somehow normalize a country that should be a pariah state. And we're also very aware that the Venezuelans have very close ties with Russia, with China, with Cuba, and with Iran. These are all the United States' adversaries and enemies. And it makes no sense for the Biden administration to be turning to Venezuela for oil when we have our own energy resources at home.
So, you know, to that point, why not drill at home?
I believe there's a lot of energy theater going on in the United States right now. It seems to me that the Biden administration is playing to the far left of the Democrat Party, people like AOC and the Squad, who have this climate change agenda. It's also nonsensical, Jenna, because you have to ask yourself, if we get oil and energy resources from Venezuela, from Iran, from Russia, from all these other countries, does it somehow make it less polluting to the environment? The answer is that no, it does not. The only thing it does do for us to be importing energy is make the United States dependent on other countries when we don't have to be. I have to remind the audience that under the Trump administration, the United States was an energy independent country, and we can go back to it.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but former U.S. envoy Eli Kohanim, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thousands of Jews fear for their lives in war-torn Ukraine. Up next, how Israel is teaming up with Christian organizations to help them escape. Welcome back. Israel is working with Christian organizations to help Jews trying to escape Russia's invasion of Ukraine. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has the story.
Israel is scrambling here and in Europe to pave the way for thousands of Ukrainian Jews to immigrate to Israel.
We are in touch with different communities and leaders of these communities, rabbis. We helping them to organize buses to the border, and then in the border we meet these buses and we help them to cross this border to accommodate them in these neighboring countries.
Ukrainian-born Roman Polanski, a regional director with the Jewish Agency, faces a chaotic task.
The situation in Ukraine is that men ages 18, 60, they cannot leave the country because they're drafted to the army. And it creates a situation when the family could be split and they have to make their choice. Wife with children and with elderly parents can go beyond the border, but men, should stay there.
Complicating the effort is that many people didn't bring family documents and some don't have passports, although the Jewish Agency has been able to mitigate some of the challenges.
These people come sometimes with only 2 bags and with cat or dogs, and they need everything. They need clothes, they need medicine, they need food. We are trying to provide them with all our help, including, by the way, also psychological help and medicine help.
Working with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, the agency has established centers near borders in Poland, Romania, Hungary, and Moldova.
Christians all around the world who help us, different organizations, both financially, but also they have their people in the field, in Ukraine and in other countries, and we rely on this chain of support as well.
Author Tom Hess is most concerned about those not returning to Israel.
There's 200,000 Jews there. I believe that God has shown that the destiny for the Jewish people is back in Israel.
In his well-known book, Let My People Go, Hess issues a clarion call to Jews and Christians alike about the importance of Jewish people returning home.
God says the destiny of the Jewish people is back in Israel in the last days. Half the Jews in the world are already back, but he says he's going to bring them all back, not leaving any behind.
Given the rush right now to rescue those in Ukraine, much work and uncertainty lie ahead. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, a small voice with a powerful message from the bunkers of Ukraine. Finally tonight, as the storm rages on in the streets of Ukraine and thousands shelter underneath, one young girl delivered a powerful message of hope. With her strong and beautiful voice, Amelia serenaded a bomb shelter in Kyiv with her rendition of the popular Disney song, Let It Go.
Отпусти и забудь, что прошло уже не вернуть. Отпусти и забудь, новый день укажет путь.
Wow, she's a beautiful voice. Well, the bunker went silent as soon as people heard Amelia's voice. Even a baby who was fussing just seconds before. The video has gone viral with millions listening online. Among them, the song's original recording artist, Idina Menzel, replying to Amelia's video, "We see you, we really, really see you, and we hear you." Good for her. Well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight. We'll leave it on that note. Have a great night.